So we're here today with Glenys Nellist. She was born and raised in a little village in northern England, the author of multiple children's books, including the best-selling 'Twas the Evening of Christmas, The Wonder That Is You, and the popular series Love Letters from God and Snuggle Time. Her writing reflects a deep passion for helping children discover joy in the world. Glenys lives in Michigan with her husband, David. So Glenys, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Brian. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's really exciting to be working with you. Before we started the recording, we were discussing how Writing for Your Life is expanding into children's books and going to be doing a lot more of that. And I was really glad to be able to, do this interview with you since it's one day before the book launch of your latest book. So,
I know.
So thanks for taking the time, first of all, in a very busy schedule for you. But tell us about your new book.
Well, it's right here. It's nothing earth-shattering, but it's a little board book, which probably everyone listening knows what a board book is, but basically it's got chunky pages, so it's great for babies and toddlers. And it's called Grandma Snuggles, and it's published by Zonda Kids, and the gorgeous illustrations are by a British illustrator, so I knew she'd be good. She's called Gail Yarrell. We've never met. The publisher is the one that chooses the illustrator, but her illustrations are just so precious. And to give you a little overview of it, I had written a couple of years ago, I'd written 2 board books called God Made Mummy Special and God Made Daddy Special. And they were written in rhyme, which is what I love to do. And a ton of people would ask me all the time, when are you going to write God Made Grandma Special? Because I have being a grandma myself, I have a lot of grandma friends, And so I knew that the interest was out there, and there's a lot of board books, aimed at grandmas. And so anyway, this is the version, is really God Made Grandma Special, but Zonda Kids said, let's have a cuter title. So, and Brian, it is amazing to me that I wrote this book 2 years ago, but that it would be released during this time when everybody's missing their grandma and grandpa snuggles, So it's amazing how, I don't know, God is at work behind the scenes, and it's just the right timing. So it's just 8 animal grandmas with their little ones. So it begins with Grandma Panda, and see how the illustrations are just so cute, and Grandma Hedgehog. So there's like 8 of these, and then it ends, I'll show you one more, there's Grandma Rabbit. But the last poem is My Grandma, and that happens to be my favorite page in the book, just because it reminds me of baking with my little grandsons, And again, they just the cute details, how she put mixture on their noses, So, and it's just the idea, as that Bible verse says, that your grandma is a gift, from God. So it's just a celebration of the love between a grandma and her little ones. And and it publishes tomorrow, so phew. Yeah. So thanks for letting me give it a shout out.
Oh, sure. It's so wonderful. And as you said, hopefully it can bring some comfort and some love during what are some pretty tough times.
Yeah. I feel bad for, I've seen quite a few newborn babies, new to the world during the pandemic time, and grandmas can't get to snuggle or hold them. So that's a hard thing,
So you've written many children's books prior to this. Can you tell us a little bit about what your publishing journey has looked like?
Yeah. So Grandma Snuggles is probably, I don't know, the 11th board book, and I probably have the same amount of picture books. So I first started writing, well, I've been writing all my life. It was my favorite thing to do as a little girl. I would write poems, I had a little desk in my dad's study at home. So I've been writing all my life, but seriously looking into publishing a book. My journey started when we left England and came to the United States. I was a teacher in England, a primary school teacher. And when we came here, my husband's a pastor, and I became a Christian education director with him. And so children's ministry was part of my biggest remit. And I started by writing my own curriculum. Curriculum I found was expensive, and a lot of it, we didn't use. And it was a small church with not a lot of money. So I thought, I'm just going to write my own. And that's really how I started writing Bible stories for my teachers to use. And that was the impetus for my first book, which was published 6 years ago, which is this one right here, which is called Love Letters from God. It's a book of 18 Bible stories, and there's Lift the Flat Love Letters from God inside. So 2014, 6 years ago, when this was published. So it's just been an amazing journey for me. I never thought when I did that first book that it would lead. That book kind of became a series, and I started writing board books. Yeah, so it's been an amazing journey for me.
So can you tell us, I'm always fascinated by people's story in terms of how they got their first book deal.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit about what your particular situation was?
Yeah, of course. So I'd written, I had the full manuscript for this book. I got it professionally edited by another children's author. And then I started looking, how do I get this thing published? And that is far harder than writing the book. Writing the book was wonderful and fulfilling, but trying to get it published is a different thing, So I sent it to a few publishers and, of course, never heard back. And I knew that I either needed an agent or I had to attend a writer's conference. And I didn't really want to pursue an agent just because I wanted to see if I could do it myself. So I took the plunge. I didn't want to attend a writer's conference either, for that matter, but my husband's like, you have to do this, So I went to Maranatha Christian Writers Conference, which is on the banks of Lake Michigan. And I met one-on-one there with an editor from Zonder Kids and was able to pitch my idea to her. And so that is how I became published. She loved it. She took the manuscript away, but I had to wait a whole year before I heard anything. So you really do have to be patient in the publishing world. And really that's how it all happened for me. So I am a huge advocate for writers' conferences, obviously, because that was my foot in the door. And incidentally, I still don't have an agent. I often wonder if I need one. I'm sure they could negotiate better book deals for me, but if there's somebody out there listening and thinking you absolutely need an agent, you don't.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And, the fact that you've got that many books published over a relatively short period of time is a pretty positive indicator about the demand for your work.
Yeah, right. And so I think agents are wonderful, and I know that they definitely have a place, but it's not something you absolutely have to have in order to be successful as a children's author. And the other thing that I really want to encourage writers about is just don't quit. Just don't give up, because if you give up on your dream, you don't know what would have happened if you'd finished it. I was halfway through writing this book and I quit. Yeah, and it's true. One day, I just heard that little voice in my ear. What are you doing? Are you crazy? You think you're going to publish a book? You really think you're good enough? That voice of discouragement, and it's hard not to listen.
Right.
Yeah, and so I did. I was halfway through and I just put it on the shelf, and it gathered dust for probably a year. And it was my husband who said, where's your book? And I said, oh, I quit. That's ridiculous. And he, bless his heart, he asked me 3 questions that I've never forgotten and that changed my life and that I always pass on to other writers. And the first thing was, he said, Glenys, do you believe that God called you to write that book? And I said, yes, because I really felt that from the start, you know, that every time I picked up the pen, it was the Holy Spirit writing through me, and it was wonderful. So I knew that God had called me to write for children. And then he said, well, if God called you to write that book, do you think God wants you to finish it? You know, I didn't want to answer because, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to answer that. But it was the 3rd question. He's got a great sense of humor, my husband, and he said, Glenys, why would you not finish that book? He said, just think for a minute. What would have happened if Noah had only built half a boat? Oh, and it was silly, and I got that picture in my mind of all the animals falling down, you know.
Right, right.
But I knew he was right, because God, as great as God is, cannot publish half a book. You know, I had to do my part and finish. So when people say, do you think, you know, people ask me, do you think it was God's will for you to write this book? I say yes, but you have to work hand in hand with God's plan for your life. Because it could still be on the shelf if it hadn't been for my husband. So my big #1 thing for writers, don't quit. Just keep going, because if you quit, you'll never know what could have been.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great story, though, too. That's really neat to hear.
Yeah.
So how would you say that your writing has evolved, you know, since you first started?
Yeah, it definitely has, for sure. I'm a different person now to what I was 6 years ago. I mean, I still have a strong faith, and I'm still really driven for children to know who Jesus is. But I think my views about God have changed. You know, my theology has kind of changed, and it's been a journey for me. And so I still love this book because it was my first one, but sometimes when I read it, I think, oh, I wish I could rewrite that little bit, you know. So, for example, now I feel I want to be much more inclusive in my writing. I don't want to label God, for example, as male. It's become really important to me to nurture wonder in the mind of a child. So not to teach as much. You know, it's hard for me because I have that background as a teacher in England, but not to teach children about God, but enable them to discover who God is for themselves. So my goal now in everything I write, and has been for the past couple of years, is definitely a gender neutral God, and just leaving room for the Holy Spirit in my words. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, you can't beat that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you're right in the middle of a book release and a book launch, you know, program. What kinds of things have you done this time that maybe have differed from your previous experiences?
Well, again, it's a whole journey, you know, it evolves. I feel like with each new book release, I learn a bit more, I get a bit better at it. The whole marketing piece for me is one that is hard work, but I've learned so much in my publishing journey. Like when this little book came out, it just came out in 2014 with no fanfare, no fuss. I did have a website. I'd built a new website, but I had no email list. Zonda Kids graciously sent the book to 50 influencers. You know, I didn't really know what influencers were at that time. And I just kind of, you know, in my naivety, I thought, we'll send it to loads of children's ministers, children's pastors, and they'll all, you know, shout it from the rooftops. But I didn't actually know a lot of those people. And I think a key in marketing your book is to use who you know and who you've made connections with, and they will do a much better job of helping you launch. Because the truth was that even though 50 people got this free book, I found myself emailing people, hi, I'm the author of Love Letters from God, did it arrive? You know, I didn't even know if the book had landed on their doorsteps. And so definitely with this little book, I have a much better sense of who is going to help me market that book and who's going to support me and be a good influencer for me. So definitely a launch team. I would not launch a book now without a launch team who are invested in helping you and who you have relationships with.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that you know, this Writing for Your Life interview and the upcoming conference will help get the word out about your book too.
That's right. I'm excited to be presenting at that conference. When is it now? Yeah, it's September 21st through the 25th.
Right.
Yeah, and so I'm really excited to be part of that conference and honored, and especially because the subject matter, which is sparking children's spiritual curiosity, you know, it's one that I really am interested in now and is a goal of mine as a writer. So, and I think it's wonderful that that conference is not just for writers, but it's for anyone who is interested in nurturing that children's spirituality. So that could be teachers, librarians, grandparents, you know, so I feel like it's going to be a great conference for everyone.
I sure hope so. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So you have had the unfortunate task of trying to do a book launch during the pandemic, which is good news and bad news. You know, not much in the way of in-person events, but at least you can do online events. So I know you did one with Baker Book House. It sounded like it went really well. You want to tell us a little bit about your experience in doing those?
Yeah, sure. That was quite the experience. It's a hard thing for a children's author to sit in a room wearing a mask for the first part of it with like maybe 4 people, somebody behind the camera and you know, somebody directing operations and no kids. And here you have to read your book. But I think it went fine. It was Baker Book House's first virtual book launch.
And was it really? Wow.
Yes. So we're all sort of learning it together, you know. But one wonderful thing about doing a virtual book launch is that it was over Facebook Live. And so I had quite a few people watching, but of course people could then watch the video. And so that reached so many more people than it would have done if I'd just been doing an in-person event. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, this pandemic, it has made all of us be more creative, think out of the box, think of new ways to reach people. And I think just as a general rule, we have to look for the positives in all of the negatives, you know.
Sure. It's very challenging times on many dimensions, but we make the best of it as we can.
That's right. Yeah, that's all we can do. Mm-hmm.
So any final words of encouragement for other children's writers?
Well, so let's see. Don't give up. Attend those conferences online, attend ours in September. And I think it's all about connecting and relationships. And so if you are looking to break into the publishing world, I would say immerse yourself in the kidlit world right now and make connections and be an encourager yourself, because one day when your book is published, all those people that you've encouraged and built up, they'll hopefully be doing the same for you. So build relationships, make connections, And if you're already an established writer, my favorite tip for established writers is one that I learned, I don't know, a few years ago, but I learned when you're having lunch with your editor or when you're emailing your editor. I was so fortunate when we moved to Grand Rapids that that's the headquarters of Zonda Kids. And so I got to have lunch with my editor. I was so nervous, you know, but I learned to ask them, what are you looking for? You know, it's just a simple thing, but you ask, what is your editor looking for? And then you try and write that. So yeah, I hope that just helps somebody out there.
Sure, sure. Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah.
Well, Glenys, I want to really thank you again for taking the time to do this amidst your busy launch schedule, and best wishes with the book. And we'll certainly be looking forward to working with you again soon.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye, Brian.